1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. Nightmare on Elm Street's become kind of a rite of passage, like Wizard of Oz, King Kong. 3, 4, better lock your door.
Like Dracula or Frankenstein, Freddy became so bigger than life, and in a way we started kind of loving what he does to us and for us.
There's two ways you can confront a killer in a horror film. One is to be terrified of him or her, and the other is to kind of flip over and identify with him or her.
5, 6, grab your crucifix.
It's strange, really, because underneath it all, he is a child killer, and the fact that you actually are sympathising with him is quite extraordinary. I do put that down to Robert's talent, being able to put it across.
Freddy had gone from being a rather nondescript menace to becoming a horror personality, the kind that you put on the covers of magazines.
7, 8, gonna stay up late. Freddy likes his job. He likes this revenge, and he had this sense of humor and this personality. And the fans embraced that. 9, 10, never sleep again.
More than any iconic horror figure, I think Freddy is the #1 badass boogeyman of all time.
We got special work to do here, you and me. Everything has an Elm Street.
We all love a good monster. Creatures that haunt us, demons that taunt us, and ghouls that feed off our deepest, darkest fears. They are the unreasonable, destructive, unknown forces that we can't control. They threaten us with pain and embrace us with a kiss of death. Every culture, every religion, every story has its monsters, both in reality and in our worst nightmares.
Monsters control our lives in many ways. I mean, Hitler was a monster. You know, death is a monster. The darkness is a monster. A frightening parent is a monster. There's things that have great power, are smarter than we are more knowing than we are, and can terminate our lives or grossly affect it.
We all grow up with fairy tales, monsters and creatures. And it's kind of interesting, actually. You're 5 years old, but your mother is sitting next to your bed and telling you like this bedtime story. And it's this super scary story about some monster eating children or something like that.
The fairy tale is always implied in these. I think, what is a nightmare but the rabbit hole, of one's subconscious.
The Greeks used to talk about the Apollonian and the Dionysian. The Apollonian was the thought of the lofty thoughts and order and civilization, and then the Dionysian is, the orgiastic and the drunken and the dancing wild pan in the forest, and humans are always wrestling with those two things. And the Dionysian side, I think, is where horror films live. It's the nightmare side. It's the side of where civilization ends and random happenstance and violence and madness can rule.
All we've got are the old stories. And if we're going back to the classical, it's Beauty and the Beast or Death and the Maiden. Those are your stories. And Elm Street is absolutely that. Literally, here is the girl, here is the monster. The monster wants to kill the girl, and the girl fights back.
Hollywood had been in the monster business since the 30s. Horror movies exposed dark secrets of the human soul, and the genre attracted edgy and sophisticated filmmakers who used its conventions to break taboos, saying and showing what others wouldn't dare. Audiences loved to be scared, and by the late 1970s, the slasher film had sliced its way into becoming a popular brand of American cinema.
There had been a glut in the early 80s of The House on Sorority Row and The Slumber Party Massacre and all those.
Friday the 13th, and Dawn of the Dead, My Bloody Valentine, and Prom Night, and all this stuff were just gory movies just for the sake of being gory.
Halloween was out before Freddy, And so was Friday the 13th. And these characters just didn't have any personality. They were just, I always describe them as the Jaws shark. You know, they were just cold kind of killers, you know.
The 1980s were a very bland decade for most people. Audiences were out waiting for the next big horror icon. And there was nothing really out there at that time. And I think Freddy shook them up a bit.
All of a sudden, Nightmare on Elm Street comes along, and it brings a supernatural element again.
At the time, you know, Exorcist, about the devil, and Texas Chainsaw, which is based on a real story, and then later Nightmare on Elm Street injects a new element into these films where it's partly funny in a way. It's horrifyingly scary.
I'm gonna split you in two.
And there is that supernatural component where Freddy really exists in dreams.
What the hell are dreams anyway?
Mysteries, incredible body hocus pocus. The truth is, we still don't know what they are or where they come from.
Dreams have always been the source of inspiration for storytellers. But nightmares unleashed their wild side. The celebrated classic monsters of literature were born out of the shadows of each author's mind. And Freddy Krueger would be no different.
I was very interested in dreams. I minored in psychology in college. I'd kept a dream journal for years and years. And I just had recently become really fascinated about the germ of an idea about somebody who could visit you, not only in your dreams, but in that sort of interstice between waking life and dream life. My parents went through a very rough sort of separation divorce when I was around 4, so I can remember not wanting to fall asleep, and I can still remember very vividly some of those nightmares. And I remember a conversation with my mother where I said, "Please come with me." And she said, "That's the one place I can't come with you to protect you. You have to go there alone." And that realization that, you know, it's in essence, it's like a grasp of death, because, you know, there's some places that just as an individual, no one can go with you. And that stayed with me the rest of my life. Freddy sort of came out in fragments of childhood experiences of a man who scared me when I was a little kid.
There's a story about he and his brother and some old guy in the street that Wes saw when he was a child. And he looked through the window and closed the blinds. And then the mom and dad were out for dinner, and he looked through the window again like 15 minutes later, and the guy was just standing there looking back up at Wes and his brother's upstairs window. And then I think they went downstairs and looked through the little pinhole in the door, and the guy was standing in the front walkway in front of the house.
You know, I sort of put him together from just kind of speculating about what would be the best colors, the most jarring colors to put side by side for his stripes.
There was things that guy wore that Wes brought to Freddy that Wes maybe cannot enumerate and remember exactly what they were, but there's a sense of it, and all of the stuff that he put on Freddy adds up to it. Wes Craven fashioned Fred Krueger into a repulsive, vile villain who was invoked by a nursery rhyme and prowled the neighborhoods of Anywhere, USA. Part deranged killer bent on revenge, part supernatural dream master whose powers seemed unlimited. Freddy was a monster of the worst kind.
And Freddy was, you know, he was somebody who preyed on children. It was the sense of just an adult who lacked all what a good adult should be, which is being protective of innocence and of children and nurturing of children. This was somebody who took pleasure in exploiting the innocence of children and killing them.
He's not killing teenagers having sex in the woods like some of the other slasher movies from the time. You know, and he's not killing just people in the neighborhood or out on Halloween. He's going after kids. That was like forbidden at the time too. I remember some of the criticism being that he's crossed the line, which Wes Craven loves to do.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
The genius of the movie for me is the fact that Wes Craven realized that people were scared to sleep. The whole idea is that we're most vulnerable when we're asleep, and anything can happen to us. And we all think about that thing is, well, if we die in our dreams, will we die in real life? And he was the first person to actually put that into a movie and make something of it.
The thing about Freddy is he's not actually a dream. He's an intruder in a dream. The idea that someone can not only come into your bedroom but can come into your head, it is a sort of a creepiness. And actually it is a terrifying thought that maybe even your dreams aren't your own. Yeah, maybe you can't even hold that. Yeah, the man is coming to get you.
You die.
When I was casting Freddy, Robert Englund came in. He was this little guy. I didn't think he looked at all like what I thought Freddy would look like. And he was able to approach the role with complete lack of worry that anybody would look at him and say, oh, there's horrible stuff inside of you. He didn't give a damn about anything like that, you know. So he just reveled in the role, and that really is what made Freddy work.
I think most of the character development came out of the movement, the body language. So there became a bit of a dance to Freddy. So that really went into how I played Freddy. That determined a lot, I remember.
Not only did he have the physical ability to play the character, he's very dynamic in those films. He's jumping around, he's jumping out of shadows. He's got a particularly creepy voice. I mean, you know, he really was the Vincent Price of the 1980s.
What's wrong, Joey? Feeling tongue-tied?
If I didn't have Robert Englund, I would have kept Freddy's mouth shut. But Robert has what people like Jack Nicholson had. There's a weird edge of danger to some performers. Even Jim Carrey has it. There's a weird sense that anything might happen with certain actors. And with Robert, he had it, and I knew I could take Freddy further, and I figured I'd trim back where we went too far, and we ended up using everything he said.
It's back in the saddle again.
No other actor could have sort of like pulled that off. It's hard to say that you want to cuddle a monster, but you actually wanted to cuddle him while you were still scared of him, and I think that's why it works, and that was the key to Robert's impersonation.
Back here, Dan!
Freddy always cracked wise, and Freddy was always a bit of a jester and a bit of a joker. And had this dark sense of humor that he used, turning teenage idiom back on itself.
Welcome to prime time, bitch!
Freddy's a smartass, and people love smartasses.
Robert, he came up with mannerisms. He made it a living, breathing person.
Please, God.
This is God.
This is God. You know, it's just like, whoa. You know, you can't write that. But Robert was a fountain of those things, you know, just ways of moving, ways of delivering, ways of, you know, there was a scene in the boiler room, Nancy is, just before she burns herself to wake herself up, where he flicks his tongue like a snake.
Come to Freddy.
That wasn't written, but Robert just threw it in. It was like, oh, that's repulsive, you know.
I think we both kind of discovered Freddy after, you know, the 4.5 hours of makeup, and I discovered a lot in that mirror.
It's a memorable makeup for many different reasons, and I think David Miller in the first film and then Kevin Yeager in the sequels really presented a character who is so badly burned but shows through the makeup. You can see that there's a man in there.
In Dream Warriors, the third film, we kind of made him look more like Robert, like he was coming out of his Freddy and becoming more human. So in designing it, I wanted to refine it more. I still had the old head cast, so I didn't have to take Robert's head cast over again. I made it less hooky-nosed, a little bit more like Robert, a little bit more like between Robert with the burn makeup and then the Freddy Krueger character. And looking back after that film was over and seeing there was something missing. It just suddenly became not Freddy to me. I missed the big cheekbones, I missed the wider, broader nose. And so on part 4, I went back and kind of split the difference, which is more like what this one behind here looks like, which is a little bit more detailed, but it kind of went back to the broader cheeks and the wider nose.
It took 6 hours every morning to put the makeup on. It's a lot of little pieces. It's not just something that you pull over your head. And, you know, when you wear that stuff all day long, it's like you get rashes and everything, and it's like not a pretty sight. But he was game, and he was very cool with the kids, all the other actors and the crew. So it's definitely a good example for a lot of actors who are not so cool.
I was sitting one day with Heather and Johnny Depp in makeup, and I remember being about 3 hours into the makeup, almost done, and I remember looking over, and in their wonderful reclining pink leatherette barber's chairs was Heather and Johnny Depp, and they had these little fans. Now, here they were getting pampered and powdered, and I resented them. I resented their youth. I resented their beauty. I was in my early 30s. I wasn't sure if I should be doing this horror movie, you know, at this stage of my career. And I went, wait a minute, I can use that. I can use this envy. It was a very real, very honest thing as an actor. I could just go, you know,